Regardless of the decade or the war, those who have witnessed and experienced trauma, death, and destruction on a routine basis must, upon their return home, pick up the pieces of their lives. PTSD can make this journey just as frightening, affecting not only the veterans, but everyone who comes into contact with them as well.
At first, when you first come home, you don't really think about it. Later on in life, it works on you.
Why was I chosen to come back? Why couldn't I have died and not have to, in reality, try to explain what I'm explaining now?
People respond very differently to the experience of combat, but we do know that the more profound the combat exposure, the more likely it is that people will, in the end, develop PTSD.
I can remember coming home from my brother's funeral, and I was so hardened that I can remember, why can't I cry? I wanted to cry at his funeral, but I just couldn't. It changes you mentally.
If the combat is profound enough, if the experience is profound enough, anyone will be affected. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is an experience that is a response to catastrophic, overwhelming, life-threatening events. That's the key trauma experience. Anyone who's been in that experience will have some repercussions.
When I first got home, I could get into fights at the drop of a hat.
Got to the point where, I didn't think I was the one that had a problem. I pretty much blamed everyone else.
I started having a really big problem with authority because it's like, you know what? I don't remember seeing you in Iraq, so why the hell should I listen to you?
PTSD is sometimes called an invisible wound because it's a series of symptoms or problems that people have after experiencing a traumatic event that are just as real as any other kind of wound, but are not something that you can capture in an X-ray or a blood test. We also see the avoidance symptoms, and the avoidance symptoms are, some people have called those the most characteristic symptoms of PTSD. It involves a lot of times a shutting off of emotions.
I'd lock myself up for days and weeks and months, and till the next thing you knew, I couldn't go out anywhere. I'd just sit home by myself.
I find that sometimes it's really hard to make eye contact with people, especially if I'm talking to someone in a crowd, because I'll just be looking who's doing what, who looks like kind of suspicious, who's being a little loud, who's maybe trying to distract attention. And it's really difficult just to sit there like, I guess, a normal person, but just to sit there and enjoy having lunch with a friend, because you're just kind of like that hyper awareness all the time.
So I actually used to have my gun very close to me in the bed, which my wife didn't like too much. It got her nervous a lot.
The arousal symptoms are those things where the person is keyed up all the time, having to be on guard all the time, be aware of any changes that might be happening in the current environment.
I find it hard sleeping at night. I go to sleep, but then I wake up and my mind starts going.
It's affected every aspect of my life, like things I didn't even realize it affected. I mean, I knew I wasn't sleeping. I knew that I shouldn't be waking up yelling.
The worst thing that comes upon me is flashbacks 2 to 3 times a week.
Maybe it only lasts a split second, it was just something that didn't want to see happen over again, and it was happening in your mind,
It was at a very thin line from becoming insane.
I mean, I came back and I felt like, hey, I'm alive, I should be grateful, I've got all my fingers and toes, and I know there's plenty of people that didn't, but there's still something always missing, something you can't get back, and you just don't know where it is. You try looking for it and you don't know where to find it. Sometimes you just think maybe I should go back there, and that's where I'll feel whole again.
That's why you hear of war veterans that drink and drug They're trying to hide from something, just like myself. I've done everything the book says a shell-shocked soldier will do.
Sometimes you're so depressed you just don't feel like you just want to remove yourself from society. Just go and live up on top of a mountain somewhere and just leave me alone.
I guess I got fascinated with death and suicide, and I came very close to hurting myself. Very, very close.
I would have never thought that I would have been in that situation, thinking that my husband was thinking about committing suicide. I felt very betrayed. I felt very angry, actually. To myself, my thoughts were, how could a person that says that they love me so much, that had a child with me, would be thinking of committing suicide, leaving me? A lot of abandonment issues came to play, and a lot of fears came up.
Post-traumatic stress disorder can affect the family in a number of ways. It can lead to a lot of family conflict, and so you'll see things like that, sort of an excessive need for order, or a lot of times people with PTSD also have anger problems. So if somebody is already sort of at the threshold of irritability and anger as they go through their day-to-day life, then as small things come up, they may have a tendency to overreact, to get really upset with their children, with their spouses, with their friends. So that can then affect trust and relationship functioning.
I had to grow up faster, had to take on a different role for my family and become the person who kept them united while he was dealing with this situation.
Constant depression, rage, anger, abusive in his manner of speech, and it was just out of control.
I would rarely see him. He would come and go. Didn't know where he was going, wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't let me know what was going on. It was very hard to connect with him.
I was afraid of my father. I was a soldier under him, you know, because that's the way he still ran his life, you know.
Fear was absolutely in our household at all times. Fear of an enemy, fear of some kind of attack on the U.S., fear that our friends wouldn't understand.
I felt that it was me, that I didn't know how to hold a relationship. I felt like a failure. You know, what am I doing wrong? Why am I making him angry, you know? What am I doing? Stay away from him. Just do nothing. Just don't bother him. And we'll all be okay. But we really weren't, because we weren't communicating.
Next, the long road to recovery.